honorary speaker is Belvedere.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good evening, adjudicated ladies and gentlemen. The topic for tonight's debate is that foreign investment and ownership are detrimental to Australia. We, the affirmative team, will demonstrate today that the negative effects of foreign investment and ownership far outweigh the benefits. We define the terms foreign investment and foreign ownership in context with Australia's current attitude towards this issue. Foreign ownership occurs when a non-Australian business or government takes ownership of Australian companies or assets. In this situation, foreigners have an active role in managing their investment in Australia. We define the word detrimental as tending to cause harm. Our team defines the term Australia as its citizens, its land, and the future fabric of Australian society. This is to say, its social and political future. Today I will be discussing the cultural and political impacts of foreign investment and ownership in Australia. My colleague Delise Russell will be discussing the economic effects, and lastly Satsu Kumaran will be summarising our arguments and present a final rebuttal. To start with, I'd like to discuss some negative cultural impacts of foreign investment. If a foreign company buys an Australian business, they will run the business in accordance with their own cultural practices. We risk losing part of what is recognised as our sense of identity and culture, since they are influenced by the foreign frameworks and manufacturing norms of their homeland. Indeed, Australian citizens vote for national leadership and parliamentary legislation that represents the values they hold, including how they want their country to operate. Our carbon emissions targets, animal and human rights laws, export and trade taxation laws are just some of the components held dear in Australian society and at risk with unrestricted approach to foreign ownership. Moreover, in its 2004 report, the Economics, Commerce and Industrial Relations Group presents many arguments confirming the dangers for countries hosting inward direct foreign investment. The group reports on how inward direct foreign investment leads to loss of cultural sovereignty. In effect, this causes Australia's distinctive cultural traditions to be lost from us as the culture of investing countries overtake and overrun the host country, in this case Australia. This is well recognised as cultural imperialism. Let me give you an example of the way in which foreign investment and ownership and subsequent cultural imperialism can negatively impact Indigenous communities. For many years, this nation has been on the path of reconciliation with its Indigenous communities by returning what is rightfully theirs to their Aboriginal elders, in particular their land. Aboriginals believe that land ownership is fundamental to our well-being both individually and collectively. This connection between land and religion is largely absent in European societies, where land is mostly a commodity to be bought and sold. So it is not surprising then that government decisions about foreign investment in lands with Indigenous historical connections are often made for commercial reasons, without sufficient attention to the negative impact the acquisition may have on the Aboriginal spiritual values and laws. Foreign investment and ownership at this time is not only insensitive to that objective, it creates further complication and is distasteful, just a shift from old colonialism to modern day colonialism. Now let's look at some negative political impacts of foreign investment and ownership in Australia. When a foreign company invests in Australia, what they get in return is control. When a foreign company decides to invest in Australia, a majority of the money that company earns often goes outside of Australia. If the industry that they're buying is of national strategic importance, then Australians are losing control over this industry and are at the mercy of foreign companies and foreign governments. For example, petrol is essential to keep the country going, as petrol has a strategic importance. If a country controls all of the petrol coming into Australia, in a time of conflict or disagreement, they could suddenly decide to switch off the tap. Then Australia would be in deep trouble. So all critical strategic infrastructure must be in the hands of Australians. This includes education, healthcare, security and defence, food, water and electricity. Companies wanting to invest in Australia need approval by the Foreign Investment Review Board. The Foreign Investment Review Board assesses potential sales based on a set of criteria which includes the transaction's potential impact on national security, the tax system and the Australian community. This is very important, however, Duncan Bedford, a lawyer who advises foreign entities looking to invest to Australia, reports that the criteria are purely subjective, and the Treasurer, who is responsible for making the final decision, generally interprets each situation to get the result that he wants. In other words, major foreign investment decisions are often political and not necessarily based on the national interests. To summarise, I have shown today how foreign investment and ownership are detrimental to Australia. It is detrimental to Australia when a foreign investor imposes their foreign culture, which dilutes and displaces our traditional Australian cultural practices and traditions. It is detrimental to Australia when foreign investors view Aboriginal land as a commodity to be bought and exploited with little regard to the spiritual connections our Indigenous communities hold with the land. It is detrimental to Australia when major foreign investment decisions are frequently political and not necessarily in the national interest. And lastly, and most importantly, it is detrimental to Australia when our critical strategic infrastructure is in control by foreigners. Thank you.
First negative speaker, Stephanie Smith.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Stephanie and I'm the first negative speaker. The topic is that foreign investment and ownership are detrimental to Australia. We, the negative team, disagree with this statement. We also disagree with the definition given by the affirmative team, as our definition of this topic would be that foreign investment being the practice in which there is a sense of business rights from one country to another. Ownership being the control of someone or something, and detrimental to Australia being harmful or damaging to this country. Tonight, I will be thoroughly discussing the diversity, multiculturalism and international relations that Australia already has and how they can further develop this through foreign investment and ownership. I will also be talking about the national anthem and how it insinuates the sharing of land throughout the country. Lastly, I will be stating how the abundance of resources that Australia has and how it can be shared globally. Our second speaker, Kiara, will be discussing how foreign investments and ownerships create jobs for future projects as well as deleting national debt. Her final point will be discussing the economics of investment and ownership. Our third speaker, Tia, will be rebutting the affirmative team's points and summarising our case. Now to my rebuttal. The first affirmative speaker stated that foreign investors will run company by their ways. This is incorrect because the Australian government has a review system in which considers community concerns. If the government believes the company is being run against Australians' beliefs, they will not be allowed to own or invest the company. The first affirmative speaker also stated that there are cultural and political impacts involved in foreign investment and ownership. This is wrong because, as I will be mentioning in my first point, foreign investment and ownership can introduce multicultural benefits, as keeping relationships with other countries can represent the diversity that Australia wishes to enforce. Now to my first point. Australia is already diverse since this country is populated with many cultures and religions from around the world. With this diversity, the foreign investment and ownership gained would therefore promote more diversity in Australia, as whatever is invested or exported to different countries, as well as from places around the world sent to Australia, would improve the multicultural relationship between different countries. Stating that this is detrimental could eventually defeat the purpose of having diversity in the first place, as foreign investment would improve this in the years to come. Ownership of land, for example, would also create a stable life for those who have come from other countries, and this would end up demonstrating cultural diversity in communities and states. Having international relations would help Australia in the future, since this would develop the association with other countries. The significance of international relations is valued in Australia, as there are no neighbouring countries. If something were to go wrong, the agreements and bonds with other countries could evidently improve and help Australia. A recent example of how international relations can help Australia was the BHP Billiton's Olympic Dams decision not to go ahead with the expansion. According to the advertiser, this project would have created over 1,000 jobs and brought financial gain to the state. If foreign investors went into partnership with BHP, the project would have brought benefits and wealth to South Australia. Foreign investors can have a good impact on Australia's future projects, proving that this isn't detrimental to Australia. I'm sure a lot of you would know the national anthem, but the lyrics can often be misinterpreted. In the third verse of the Advanced Australia Fair, it says, "To make this Commonwealth of ours, renowned of all the lands, for those who come across the seas with boundless plains to share." This may not seem much, however, it clearly states the willingness of sharing land. As mentioned previously, the diversity and multiculturalism is something that the country has a lot of, so the foreign ownership of land would not be unfamiliar. Foreign investment and ownership of land should therefore be accepted. Without foreign investment and ownership in Australia, this country would collapse economically. The importance of having boundless plains to share shows the acceptance of land ownership in Australia. Now to my final point. Australia has an abundance of resources to share globally. These resources include agriculture, mining and fauna. Australia depends on foreign investors to support us, as trading with other countries help to strengthen the economy. The resources that Australia has can be shared with other countries, so it's not like Australia would have a lack of these things. Australia has a free trade agreement with China, in which this agreement has less policies with things like selling produce. According to the Australian Mines and Metals Association, Australia is a major exporter of energy, food and natural resources and has a long-term economic growth. During a financial crisis, Australia was mainly protected due to the resource boom and trade agreements with Japan, Korea and China. Since this trade agreement with other countries ended up helping Australia, it shows the importance of having international relations with foreign investment and ownership, as mentioned previously in my first point. Therefore, this does not have a detrimental effect on Australia. To conclude, foreign investment and ownership have brought diversity and multiculturalism to Australia, as well as helping this country to develop international relations. The national anthem insinuates how Australia has boundless claim to share and the abundance of resources to share globally. Foreign investment and ownership are not detrimental to Australia. Thank you.
I call upon the second affirmative speaker, Aloysius Russell.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for tonight's debate is that foreign investment and ownership is detrimental to Australia. We, the affirmative team, strongly agree with this statement. Before I begin my argument, I would like to take a moment to rebut the opposing team's more misleading points. The opposition's first speaker has tried to tell you that foreign investment includes diversity. However, by definition, foreign investment is offshore and therefore does not increase diversity within our borders, since those who own the companies live offshore. The opposition has also tried to tell you that resources that do go offshore will eventually filter back into the Australian economy through other international trades. While this may be true, it's not a system reliable enough to base our economic prospects on. We need an unquestionable source of reliable income that is unbiased from international politics. And now, on to my points. Firstly, I would like to speak about the clear downfall of the Australian housing market since foreign property investment has been introduced. We are all aware that Australian real estate is some of the most expensive in the world. A study done last year by the International Housing Affordability Committee found Sydney to be second to Hong Kong as the least affordable city in the world for homeowners. But this fact alone is not enough to blame foreign investors for the destruction of our housing market. Other studies, such as data collected from the real estate RP firm, show prices for Australian homes in capital cities' values have increased 13.2% in the 21 months since January 2014. This can be linked to a study done in the same time frame by the Foreign Investment Review Board that showed foreign property investment rose 44% from 2012 to 2014. This shows a distinct correlation between when the real estate market began to rise and when foreign investment reached a peak. But again, it could be argued that this is all a coincidence, as there's no proven connection. However, even more evidence can be found that increasing house prices are due to foreign investors. NAB's quarterly residential property survey, released last October, reveals that during the third financial quarter of 2015, 19% of all new apartments and 14.9% of new homes were purchased by foreign buyers, raised significantly from the 16.1% and the 11.5% recorded in the 3 months from June. To reiterate, in just 3 months, the amount of foreign investors buying Australian apartments increased by 3%, and those buying homes increased by 3.4%. This is clearly because of foreign buyers that, according to the Government Taxation Office, are willing to pay upwards of 10% more for a chance at a luxury Australian home in this growing market. What chance is there for Australian buyers to afford homes when the market is flooded with foreign investors? And what chance is there of this perpetuating problem to ever come to a standstill without changes to the regulations that we already have? Even Christopher Kent of the Reserve Bank, who claims that foreign investors are having no effect, said it was hard to deny that foreign investors will propagate to have a negative effect. So, ladies and gentlemen, it has been proven that foreign investment has been detrimental for the property market, and it has been proven that the market will continue to decline if their influence remains unregulated. My final point is that many farms and tourist destinations that Australia is known for are now owned by offshore investors, and the money being earned off of Australian soil is going overseas. An example of this is Singapore-owned Olam International, which now controls almost 45% of Australian almond production, or that Qatar-based Hassad Foods now owns $60 million worth of sheep grazing land, and just last week, the Arab states bought 50,000 hectares of farmland in Western Australia. That's larger than many small countries. In response to the report containing these facts published by the ACCC, Nick Xenophon said, "What people don't realise is that if someone buys prime agricultural land, we can't force them to sell us the food from that land. Because of this, Australians are buying back food that was grown here from other countries for more than it's worth, and we're losing money on more than one front. Often, the owners of the land are not Australian, and the government cannot force them to pay tax. Li Ka-shing, a Chinese businessman who owns 51% of the South Australian power grids, owes $76 million in taxes, which he refuses to pay. That's $76 million that's being kept from our hospitals, schools, and social services. Instead of earning and keeping money in our economy, we're giving it away for produce and utilities that were grown on our soil." And it's not just farms and utilities that are under threat from foreign ownership. Airports and shipping ports are also prime targets for international investors. A survey done by The Strategist shows foreign investment in airports and seaports has the lowest level of public support of any sector of the economy. In polling, sponsored by the State Department, 43% of the public thought that there was a lot of risk to national security when selling international ports to foreigners, while another 46% felt that there was at least some risk. The poll concluded that the Australian government should rethink their choices of when to put national security ahead of economic gain and refuse to allow investor influence when dealing with national security. It's all well and good getting a cash grab up front from selling our assets, but in the long run, Australia will not benefit from the revenue. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, it can be seen that foreign ownership and investment has had a detrimental impact on the Australian economy, specifically through our property market, farming land, and international hubs. I would like to conclude with a quote from Lynn Wilkinson, a spokesperson from AusBuy. "When countries buy our land, it raises issues of sovereign risk. And in our grab for cash, we lose the intellectual property of generations of Australian farmers."
Good evening, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for tonight's debate is that foreign investment and ownership are detrimental to Australia. We, as a negative team, firmly disagree with the statement given. I would first like to begin by rebutting a few points propositioned by our opponents. The second affirmative speaker mentioned that foreign investment increases property prices. We, as a negative team, beg to differ as, according to the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, overseas buyers actually help make housing more affordable because the investment boosts the economy, providing jobs and lowering prices by increasing supply of properties. Moving on, as previously discussed by my team member, Stephanie, here in Australia, we have unbelievable abundances of both raw and man-made materials and property, which can be easily shared amongst all nations. She also raised the prevalent point of the multiculturalism and diversity that we as a country will be exposed to. My argument will consist of various economic factors correlating to this topic, including the alleviation of our country's monumental government debt and the generation of both employment and future projects that will be beneficial to our nation. No doubt about it, Australia is currently $768 billion in government debt. As a country, in fact a continent, with such a small population of approximately 28 million, the tax revenue that we produce annually, which is estimated to be $405 billion for 2015 to 2016, according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, is not nearly enough to alleviate such a debt, as there is an approximate difference of $363 billion. We need action, we need help, and foreign investors are willing to put in the copious amounts of both time and money into our nation to alleviate this debt. Furthermore, the profits that foreign investors receive have taxations implemented from the government. We then receive a portion of these profits, which are then put into our government debts. How can we as a country be so glacial to foreign investment and ownership? How can we turn our heads away to such an answer as this one? An example of a foreign investment proposition hitting our headlines currently is the infamous nuclear waste plant dilemma taking place on our own very soil. Countries are willing to pay South Australia hundreds of billions to create a high-tech plant that converts nuclear waste into power. The location set to be the Aboriginal Sacred Land approved barren land by the name of Barndoota. We benefit from this through both the cash injection that will go directly towards our state debts, for example, the $100 million Royal Adelaide Hospital debt, and various long-term jobs will be generated as a result. This leads on to my next point of jobs and future projects. As time is passing, various homegrown industries are beginning to subside into debt and closure. For example, the soon foreclosure of our beloved Holden Car Company. As of this, thousands of people will be joining the current 800,000 unemployed people of Australia, according to the Sydney Morning Herald. This forces the loss of many needed incomes for various citizens. Surprisingly enough, foreign investment and ownership will generate thousands of needed jobs and can revive the already existing industry that we currently have. How, you may ask? Through creating new corporations or by purchasing existing ones, therefore expanding business portfolio and securing and opening opportunities of long-term jobs that are only suited for our highly skilled nation as a beneficial result. The Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade endorses foreign investment and ownership when they state in their online prospectus, foreign investment helps Australia reach its economic potential by providing capital to finance new industries and enhance existing industries, boosting infrastructure, productivity and employment opportunities in the process. A further advantage from the expansion and reinvestment of current corporations, such as mining, and the creation of new corporations, small or large, includes the establishment of new innovative technological ideas. We also have the vast opportunities of both exporting and importing items that our beloved country is not exposed to. As countries with fresh ideas integrate with our businesses, we unlock new key concepts that will further our nation both in economic and future growth aspects. It makes sure that we are moving forward as a nation with a booming economy state of mind. So, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, we as an almost crumbling economic nation cannot thrive, let alone survive, on our own tax revenue. We are in desperate need of foreign investment and ownership. We are a global world, and by us as a country further isolating ourselves, we will do more harm than good. Some resources are unattainable in our nation, and we are swiftly falling short of our funds. Foreign investment and ownership is the answer to these problems. Thank you.
Speaker Sukumari.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, Madam Chairman, and welcome to tonight's debate. The topic for tonight's debate, as you all know, is that foreign investment and ownership is detrimental to Australia. Before I begin my team's summary, I would first like to point out some inconsistencies and fallacies in the opposition's argument. The second speaker of the opposition has tried to tell you that foreign investment in Australia will magically lift Australia out of national debt. Even if this does happen, it will only be a short fix for a long-term problem. Foreign ownership, giving away our resources and our assets, is not the answer to taking us out of this problem. It's simply putting this problem for future generation, putting this problem away for future generations to deal with. She also mentioned that South Australia has been pushing away deals about storing nuclear waste here from other countries. I'd like to mention that this is not foreign investment. This is simply a business deal that South Australia could take on to create its own revenue. The second speaker of the opposition has also tried to tell you that foreign investment and ownership will increase jobs and revitalise dying sectors. However, this is not a sustainable means to recreate these businesses or to give jobs back to people. The ramifications for this are too great, and there are other avenues that need to be explored before we simply throw our lot in with foreign investment and ownership. Australian exports should be the future of the Australian economy. We should be able to take our own initiative, and in doing so, there will be more benefit for us now and in the future. The first speaker of the opposition has tried to tell you that if companies that invest in Australian companies are found to not fall in line with national interest, that the government has the power to stop them. Firstly, foreign investors in agribusinesses do not need prior approval if they are foreign government investors. This is according to the FIRB. And also, in addition to this, if they own it, we can't force them to sell it back to us or even force them off the land. After they own it, it is essentially theirs to control. The first speaker also said that because we have such a multitude of resources and that we should allow foreign ownership to occur. First of all, just simply selling off resources, it's just because we have them is not a financially viable move. We may not be able to afford to sell it off, and the ramifications in the future may be too great for us to handle. According to an Australian Bureau of Statistics report released in July 2013, there has been a 55% increase on the 2010 level of foreign ownership in agricultural and water entitlements. This, ladies and gentlemen, has the potential to lead to expropriation, which is when a foreign body has control over the majority of assets in another country. This is something that would definitely cause headaches for us in the future. The first speaker's third point was to say that foreign investment and ownership, saying that foreign investment and ownership is detrimental, may go against our idea of multiculturalism. However, wanting to put national interests before our own isn't going against the spirit of this. Furthermore, international trade is the way we keep these relations strong, not foreign investment and ownership. Our first speaker, Isabel, talked to you tonight about some of the detrimental political, cultural and environmental effects that foreign trade and investment has on Australia, and the potential implications these could have in the future. She spoke to you about how foreign investments lead to a loss of cultural sovereignty. She also talked about how foreign investments and ownership could negatively impact Indigenous communities, and also the cultural relations between them would be affected by foreign controlling interests. Her third point was about how selling off resources and Australian businesses, we are essentially relinquishing control over those assets, and how this means that foreign companies have influence over in our political spheres, even more so than our own citizens and our own national interests. Delise, our second speaker, spoke about some of the negative impacts that foreign trade and investment has had in Australia's economy. She also talked about how this could harm Australia's economy in the future. She mentioned how, due to foreign investors in the housing market, the prices for house ownership have increased steadily, and how they're expected to increase in future years. Another issue she raised was in relation to foreign investment in our agricultural sector, and how instead of putting money into the economy, we are simply giving money to foreign interests for food for the food grown on our own soil. She spoke further about how offshore investors cannot be forced to pay tax, despite large impositions in Australian assets. To conclude, ladies and gentlemen, foreign investment and ownership may not seem like an outwardly negative concept. In fact, to a certain extent, it can provide some financial advantages. However, in current Australian economic climate, as well as how loosely foreign investments are currently regulated by the Australian government, it is something that has a detrimental effect on Australia, and these effects will be felt for generations to come.
Executive Speaker, Tia Exkinetos.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for tonight's debate is that foreign investment and ownership are detrimental to Australia. We, the negative team, strongly believe this statement to be false. Tonight I'll be summarising my team's case after I rebut the affirmative team's points. The affirmative team has said that foreign investment takes away from our economy and that foreign investment is a short-term fix for a long-term problem of Australia's debt. This is incorrect, as foreign investment helps Australia to reach its economic potential, as according to the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, foreign investment provides money to finance and enhance existing industries, boosting infrastructure productivity and employment opportunities in the process, meaning that foreign investment is beneficial to Australia, not detrimental. The affirmative team has said that foreign investment increases property prices. We, the negative team, beg to differ, as according to a report from the real estate company RP Data, overseas buyers actually help to make housing more affordable because the investment boosts the economy, provides jobs and encourages new homes to be built, increasing house supply. Rather than causing price pressures, the evidence suggests that foreign investments actually help keep prices lower by increasing supply. The Master Builders Association of Australia informed the inquiry from RP Data that foreign investors and Australian home buyers rarely competed for the same properties. Foreigners tended to prefer new high-density inner-city properties often close to universities. These properties tend to be valued well above the average national sale price. The preference for foreign investors is at the higher end of the market, with a $1 million average for established real estate for temporary residents and a $647,000 average for individual purchases of new dwellings, way beyond the reach of an aspiring first home buyer, spokesman Amanda Lynch told a hearing in May. Foreign investors aren't competing with Australian home buyers. Data from the Australian Bureau of Statistics reveals that 80% of first home buyers and Australian home buyers purchase established homes. Therefore, foreign investors do not take property from Australian home buyers. The affirmative team has stated that foreign investors will run the companies they invest in as they please. This is incorrect, as the Australian government has shown that their review system allows them to consider community concerns around foreign ownership of certain assets when assessing Australia's national interest. The national interest test also recognises the importance of Australia's market-based system, where companies are responsive to shareholders and where investment and sale decisions are driven by market forces rather than external strategic or non-commercial considerations. The affirmative team has also stated that foreign investors now own many of our farmlands and tourist attractions. The affirmative team has failed to mention that majority of the foreign investors do not own our land, they simply have a leasehold, meaning it is not set in stone. The affirmative team mentioned that foreign investment means that we cannot take back land that has been bought by foreign investors. The Australian government considers carefully the benefits before selling properties. On the Australian government website, it clearly states that the government welcomes foreign investment and that the investment promotion agency Austrade works to inform investors about growth opportunities which play to Australia's strengths. These opportunities are agreed by all Australian states and territory governments. The five areas are agribusiness and food, major infrastructure, tourist infrastructure, resources and energy, and advanced manufacturing services and technology. Austrade informs foreign investors of the opportunities within these industries. With foreign investment, our economy is boosted and jobs are created. I will now summarise my team's case. The first negative speaker, Stephanie, has mentioned how having foreign investment in Australia promotes diversity and multiculturalism. This in turn creates strong bonds between Australia and other countries. Having these international relations would benefit Australia greatly in the future. She then discussed how our own national anthem advanced Australia fair and how it read, "To make this commonwealth of ours renowned of all the lands, for those who've come across the seas with boundless faiths to share." A single line of our national anthem embodies what we as a country desire to strive towards. Foreign investment would assist Australia in achieving this goal. Lastly, she discussed how Australia has an abundance of resources to share globally. Australia's free trade agreement with China, as well as other countries, allows for foreigners to invest more easily in Australia, having already established a strong relationship. Our second speaker, Kiara, talked about how Australia is in government debt and how foreign investment is alleviating this debt. She discussed how we, Australia, are $768 billion in government debt, and we fall short with our tax revenue, which is approximately $405 billion. Foreign investors that invest money into our nation receive Australian taxation to their profits, which then go towards our government debts. As a result of foreign investors investing in new corporations or existing establishments, new long-term secure jobs will be generated, as well as new products and industry. As a result of new jobs and industry, new technological ideas and concepts will be shared amongst our nation, and as previously discussed by our second speaker, Kiara. This therefore proves that moreover, the evidence is clear that foreign investment is beneficial to Australia and not detrimental, proving that having foreign investment in Australia would be beneficial.
Please wait while the adjudicator finalises the results. I now invite the adjudicator, Mr. Moritz, forward.
Good evening, everyone. Just a few notices before I get into the adjudications. You are all invited to attend the grand finals, which will be held in the House of Assembly chamber in Parliament House on Saturday the 24th of September. There is no need to RSVP, so hopefully one of the teams here tonight will be there as well. Secondly, we are still selling tickets to our great debate on Saturday the 22nd of October. It's at 6 to 8:30 p.m, and it promises to be a fun evening of food, champagne and a comedy debate. Tickets can be purchased from the information desk or online, and we do accept cash or credit cards. And tickets are $20 as well. So, going on, the winning team of tonight's debate, we are in room 3, is that correct?
Yep.
Yep. So we'll be the negative team next week, and all semi-finals will be held here again at Pembroke Middle School at the same time next Wednesday. And I assume that the topic will be available on the website. Alright, on to tonight's debate. So firstly, congratulations to all the debaters for making it to the quarter-final round. It's always a really good achievement. And obviously, you're all quite accomplished speakers, so you do get a little bit of feedback tonight. It's the last opportunity that we have to give you a little bit of feedback at the end of the year, and to hopefully improve for the winning team in your next debate, and the team that doesn't continue, we hope to see you in debating next year a little bit improved. So I'll be focusing tonight upon the arguments that were presented, rather than how well you speak, because you all obviously speak quite well at this level. So firstly, we did have a disputed definition in tonight's debate. And I think it really did show that until you really have a debate that in which a definition debate, it is difficult to know how to handle it. So essentially, the affirmative team offer their definition. It could be whatever they like, essentially. Tonight it was a rather a standard definition. It wasn't anything too outrageous, I thought. and I thought that it did interpret the team's case as well quite well for the affirmative team. From the negative side, I wasn't clear upon the reason why you were disputing or changing the definition. So it's really important that as a negative team, if you do want to change or dispute the definition, which you are completely entitled to do, you let the audience know why you're doing that, because that will form a fundamental part of your argument. Tonight, it wasn't made particularly clear either why you were disputing the definition or the major changes that were being done to the definition from your side. So that does need to be really clear from either team if you do want to dispute a definition. Then, after there is a challenge to the definition, it needs to be continually referred to throughout the debate, because both teams' arguments are based upon their individual definitions. And so we as the audience need to be reminded of that, and you probably actually need to remind the opposition of your definition as well. And then you need to argue for your definition as the better one, essentially. And the final point of how to go about a definition debate is that when you're rebutting, you can't just say, for example, oh, that's irrelevant to the debate by our definition. You need to say, even if we accept the opposition's definition, these are some more reasons why it was done. So tonight we had a challenge to the definition that could have been clearer, but then the affirmative side as well needed to really pick up with the definition again in each speaker. So we had definitions from the first speakers, and then they didn't get brought back up again for the rest of the debate. So while it's in the background of the debate, it needs to be brought forward because it is very important. So I thought tonight across the board we had some very well researched arguments on both sides. On the affirmative side, there were a couple of times when I thought that perhaps you needed to be clearer about the detriments of foreign ownership or investment, and perhaps the detriments of Australian political processes. And it wasn't always clear whether you thought the political processes around foreign ownership were the problem, for example, the review board, or the foreign investment itself. So always make sure that you are being as clear as you possibly can. But yeah, I did think that there were some particularly well researched arguments, and I particularly liked the housing argument. That was quite well researched. On the negative side, as well, good research, but at times there was, I thought, a confusion between foreign ownership and investment and foreign trade. So it wasn't always clear if you were focused upon ownership and investment or trade, which can happen without ownership and investment. So again, always make sure that you are linking back into the topic and being really clear. However, I did particularly like, particularly in our third negatives, Tia's rebuttal, I thought was really good on the housing point. Very well researched, and did a really good comparison between Australian buyers and foreign buyers, which was the only real comparison between the two that we got during the debate, and I thought that was very well executed. The affirmative team as well did offer some quite good rebuttal, so it was a very well contested debate. However, ultimately it did come down to, I think, the team who had this more cohesive team case that just had that little bit more of a thrust towards arguing around their definition that was offered, and that was tonight the affirmative team. And our debating award tonight goes to our second affirmative team.
I call upon a member of the runner-up team to give a vote of thanks.
Thank you everyone who came, friends and family, and thanks for the chairman and timekeeper and the adjudicators, and yeah, thanks for a good proposition.
I call upon a member of the winning team to second that vote of thanks.
We'd also like to thank everyone for coming out tonight. Congratulations to the team for making it to the finals. You did such a good job. Thanks, everyone.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attendance. I now declare this debate closed.